Welcome to Licensing Subcommittee. Can we go through the protocols for remote hearing? Only speak when invited to by the chair. Speak, please raise your hand and direct all communication via the chair. Will everyone please ensure their mics are muted when they are not speaking apart from the chair? When speaking, be succinct and do not exceed the allocated time. If you are referring to a specific page or picture in a report, refer to the page number. If you're having any technical difficulties, please use the chat function in Google Meet to alert the meeting or dial in. Please do not use the chat function for putting formal questions to the subcommittee. Any persistent disruptive behaviour result in removal from the meeting. Once the application has been considered, any remaining parties will be asked to log out of the hearing. Please do so promptly so that councillors will have the opportunity to deliberate and make a decision. Each party will be notified of the decision within 5 working days. Thank you. I'll hand over. Can I start off with the first item on the agenda? Can we elect a chair, please?
I propose Councillor Gordon.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Odds. I'm happy to take the chair. There's only 2 councillors this evening, so I don't think we're going to have a formal seconder for that. So I'm now going to move on to agenda item 2, which is apologies for absence. I understand our colleague Councillor Moema has submitted apologies for absence. Agenda item 3 is declarations of interest. Do members have any interest to declare? I don't.
I don't.
Okay, so agenda item 4. I'm now going to outline the licensing subcommittee procedure that we're going to be following this evening. If you've got an agenda pack, it's towards the front. I don't think my copy's not numbered, but it is towards the front, just before the papers concerning this evening's application. So step 1, I'm getting some interference. Is that affecting anybody else? I think people are nodding. Is anyone else getting interference? There's a little bit of interference as well when Rabia was speaking.
Mm-hmm.
Can people understand me properly?
Yep.
Okay, we'll plough on, but obviously people indicate if they can't hear. Okay, so step 1 is the appointment of a chair, and we've obviously completed that. So, and then we're going to introduce the subcommittee, which is myself, my colleague Councillor Odds. I'm Councillor Margaret Gordon, representing Lea Bridge Ward. Councillor Odds can introduce himself.
I'm Councillor Odds, representing Springfield Ward.
Yep. So, we'll. I'm going to go. We'll go through other introductions when we get there. So we're then going to consider any requests, if appropriate, to depart from normal procedure. I don't think none have been notified to me, and I'm now outlining the how the hearing is going to proceed. So the first formal step of the hearing is going to be that I'm going to invite the licensing officer to outline the report. Step 3 is that I'm going to invite the applicant who's present or their representative to present their case in support of their application. And I ask you to take 5 minutes for that. I'll remind you the time when we get there. Step 4, I'm going to invite any responsible authorities present in attendance to highlight their reasons for objecting to the application, if appropriate. Step 5 is the other person's part of the proceedings. I'm then going to invite any other persons in attendance tonight, and I note there are a number of people. I'll be asking you to introduce yourselves in a minute to highlight their reasons for objecting or supporting the application. We're then going to move on to step 6, which is a discussion where I will structure and lead a discussion on the information presented so that we can clarify any points and raise questions if necessary. And then step 7, we're going to follow on to closing remarks. So I'm going to be asking the responsible authorities, other persons, applicants, the licensing officer, if they've got any final comments to make. These comments can only be made in relation to issues raised during the discussion. These remarks should be brief. And then step 8 is any final clarification. We'll have the opportunity to seek clarification on any points raised. And then step 9, as Rabia indicated at the beginning, we're then going to be asking everybody who's not part of the deliberation process to leave the meeting, and we will consider the evidence and come to a decision. So that's the procedure for this evening. As this is a remote hearing, you'll be notified of the decision following the hearing within 5 working days. So I'm now going to move on to introductions. I'm chairing this evening, obviously introduce myself, Councillor Margaret Gordon, my colleague Councillor Odds. I'm going to call on people from the screen to introduce yourself, starting with our licensing officer, Suba.
Hi, I'm Subhashri. I'm our Principal Licensing Officer.
Thank you. And our legal advisor.
Good evening. I'm Amanda North, assisting members this evening. Thank you.
Yeah. And our governance officer, Rabia. You already introduced yourself, but you can quickly do it again.
Rabia Khatun, Governance Service Officer.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much. All right. I'd now like the applicant and representative to introduce themselves.
Yeah, I'm Andy Newman. I'm the representative or agent for Nest Morning Lane Limited. I'd like to introduce the applicant.
Yeah, I'm Luke, representing. So my 2 business partners are working this evening, so they won't be here. But yeah, representing Nest Morning Lane.
Okay. Thanks very much for attending. And can our licensing officer also introduce himself? David.
Hi, I'm David Tew, Team Leader, Licensing and Technical Support.
Yeah, I don't think there's any other responsible authorities present this evening. So we'll now move on to the other parties, and I'll call out your name and ask you to introduce yourself. Councillor Pluvier.
Hi, yes, thanks. I'm Councillor Pluvier, representing local residents in London Fields Ward, which is the ward that I represent.
Thanks very much. And then Louise Cuddington, just going around my screen.
Yeah, Louise Cunnington. I'm a resident on Mentmore Terrace, very close to where the restaurant is proposed.
Okay. Ollie Solman.
Evening. Yeah, I'm Ollie Solman. I'm a local resident. I live opposite the proposed venue.
Thanks very much. Troy Healy.
Hello, I'm Troy Healy. I'm a planning consultant working with Nest and here to answer any questions that are related to planning's interaction with licensing.
Apologies, I thought you were one of the other parties, so you're part of the applicant. Thank you, that's really helpful. Emily Tracy. Emily, you there?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, thank you.
Hi, I'm a neighbour of Ollie's, and I live opposite the proposed Nest building.
Thank you. Gala Carr.
Yep, hello, good evening. Yep, I'm a resident of Mentmore Terrace.
Okay. Sean Pollock. Sean?
Hello. Hi. Yeah, I'm a resident of Mentmore Terrace.
Thanks very much, Sean. And then Anna Stewart is the last person I can see on my screen.
Hi, can you hear me?
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm also a resident of Mentmore Terrace.
Thanks very much, Anna. And last but not least, we've got Mario, who heroically provides our technical support for this meeting and many, many others, which are online. So thanks very much for that, Mario. Okay. Thanks very much, everyone, for giving your time to attend this evening. You've obviously, heard what Rabia said about the way that we expect to proceed, and hopefully we can have a very sort of productive and fruitful evening. So agenda item 5 is minutes of the previous meeting, and we don't have any minutes this occasion as I understand it. So we're now moving on to the substantive item, which is agenda item 6, which is application for a premises licence for Nest Morning Lane Limited in Mentmore Terrace E8. And I'm going to invite Suba, our Principal Licensing Officer, to outline the application. And Suba, I'd be very grateful if you could just give as much detail as possible, because there has been, I think, a little bit of sort of toing and froing in relation to this. So it'd be really, really helpful if you could just outline exactly what your understanding is of the conditions proposed and whether they're different from the printed papers, if appropriate. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Licensing service are in receipt of an application for a premises license under Section 17 of the Licensing Act 2003 for Nest Arches 392 to 393 Mentmore Terrace, as stated in the agenda. Since the draft of the report, the applicant has provided additional submission in which they have reduced the hours for supply of alcohol for on sales Monday to Thursday from 12 to 2300, Friday and Saturday from 12 to 23:30, Sunday 12 to 23:30, with closing time 30 minutes after, removal of off sales. There will be no outside seating or services, amend and propose new conditions, disposal policy and amended plans. All these informations can be found under the next additional information document in the website, and it has been circulated. Representation remains from the licensing and 17 other persons, as one of the other person has withdrawn their representation based on the amended hours and conditions. We have also received additional information from other persons, C16 and C18, which have been circulated. I have nothing else to add. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Suba. That's really helpful. So, okay. So I'll now, I think, invite the applicant's agent, Mr. Andy Newman, to present his opening statement. You have up to 5 minutes. Doesn't mean you need to use it all, but thank you very much. If you could just present your opening statement.
Thank you, Madam. Before I start, and good evening, everybody, may I just correct one or two things from the original presentation. I know that there's been a lot of paper and to and froing, which is the nature of the beast, but Sundays was shown as noon to 22:30, not 23:30, 22:30. In terms of no seating, there's an exception for those with disability or mobility issues among the smokers and those who don't smoke to comply with legislation. And might I just say also that no other responsible authority or non-responsible authority has made any representation with the exception of Mr. Tuitt. Right, so if I may, this is an application for the Arches 392 and 393 Mentmore Terrace, which was formerly the waiting room for London Fields Station, so it's next door. As stated, the application is now for on-sale supply of alcohol and late night refreshments, and there'll be a further amendment. So we are going to exclude Monday. So it will be Wednesday to Thursday, noon to 11 p.m. Friday and Saturday, noon till 11:30 p.m. And Sunday, we're reducing from noon till 20:30, each day having 30 minutes for the premises to close to patrons. Okay, so one, Madam Chair and fellow councillors, you can be reassured that Nest have agreed to a robust set of conditions, especially for a restaurant. Two, their history as operators at Fen Fulham and Nest Morning Lane demonstrates that there has never been one single complaint by any resident or group of residents, or indeed any action by one single authority. 3, the acclaim from patrons from their 2 existing restaurants should give you confidence. The acclaim from the Evening Standard, The Guardian, The Telegraph, MasterChef critic William Sitwell, and many more should also give you confidence. And the people giving their support in supporting evidence, including a business of fisheries in Mentmore Terrace, and a man who lives in an adjoining street and also has a desk in the fisheries, should give you confidence. The 3 applicants or directors for the applicant, they're supplying 4 local jobs for people of Hackney. 2 of them live in Hackney. It's notable that the London Fields user group chair has withdrawn his representation because his concerns are allayed. May I draw you to this? The police, who are recognised as the lead for crime and disorder, including ASB, antisocial behaviour, have withdrawn their representation. They're happy with the conditions. Environmental health, both noise, especially, and waste, are also happy, don't have any concerns, along with all the rest, including planning, who haven't even made an informative. This is not in a special policy area or anywhere near one. We do appreciate the concerns of residents. We've offered to meet them. Pleased to say we met 3 of them, plus the chair of the user group. Would welcome speaking to more, especially including Councillor Pluvier. But we would say that there is no evidence to say that this restaurant with these operators will be any kind of problem whatsoever, and their hours are slightly under the core hours, and we would invite you to grant the licence. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thanks very much. That's very helpful. I can see that our legal advisor's got her hand up. Amanda?
I just wanted to clarify. I thought that the proposed amended hours on Sunday was 12 to 22:30, but I thought I heard Mr. Newman say 12 to 20:30. Can you just clarify that, just so that I've got that correctly recorded?
Yes, certainly, Amanda. Very well spotted. Indeed, it was 22:30, but we've actively listened, and the applicants would like to bring that down to 20:30 to try and make, this so balanced. They're so mindful of people that they want to do their very best.
So that's your application in terms of Sundays now to 20:30.
Thank you.
Yes, madam, but to clarify, to 20:30, but with 30 minutes to close the premises to patrons.
Okay, thanks, that's very helpful. Councillor Rhodes, do you have any questions for the applicant?
Yes, I do. Thank you very much. When you were going through the hours, you said you're excluding Monday, but then you proceeded to give hours for Wednesday and Thursday. What about Tuesday?
Did I? Thank you. That was an error. That is the Tuesday. Thank you. That is a Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday.
12 to 2300.
Yes, with 30 minutes to clear the place of patrons.
Yeah. Now, the application is for supply of alcohol and for late night refreshment. Those hours, are they for both? I mean, given the hours that you've given, on the papers, late night refreshment goes on to midnight every day. So would that fall by the wayside apart from Friday and Saturday?
Yes, Luke, correct me if I'm wrong, but exactly, that's late night refreshment, as you know, is from 2300 hours. Yeah. The only day we're applying for late night refreshment is on the Friday and the Saturday, which is from 2300 hours to 2330. for the supply thereof.
Obviously, it would affect the opening hours of the premises as well.
Well, that's why we've limited it's to
Yeah,
23:30 for the supply of late night refreshments, hot food and drink.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, if there's no other questions, I'll now move on to the responsible authorities.
Thank you, Chair. So my representation is in today's agenda at Appendix B. I'll keep this very brief because most of what I've raised in the representation has actually been addressed, and in the various back and forth consultation that we've had since the application was made and a representation was submitted. So I highlighted a few things in relation to conditions, essentially in relation to alcohol being ancillary to table meal, which is accepted. The removal of the recorded music element, which I think is a common let's say misunderstanding of applicants who sometimes think that recorded music has to be selected when their intention is only for background music. So that was the case in this particular application, and that's also been resolved now also. It's just the only thing that I do know is that in relation to the hours of operation. So I was able to find a planning application pack. So the application form, the design and access statement, and within that design and access statement, it talks about the hours of activity being from 8 AM till 11 PM daily. So we've heard from Mr. Newman that the hours have been amended and on some days of the week removed completely, but there are some days where potentially the license would go beyond the planning permission, potentially. And the reason I say potentially is because the planning decision isn't actually on the council's website, only the application and the supporting documents. I'm aware that an application is in the process of being made to extend those hours on those days of the week where it appears that the hours of activity would exceed the current planning permission. So I'm aware of that happening. It's just to bring to members' attention that it may be the case that where planning permission was granted, it was only to 11 o'clock, and obviously that has a potential policy implications when we're considering LP5 and an impact on the prevention of public nuisance given the character of the street. So that's the only representation I have at this stage. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks very much, Mr. Tuitt. I think we're talking Fridays and Saturdays are the 2 days which is going to be beyond 2,300 hours.
I should be very, very clear, Chair, that it's potentially beyond, yes.
Yeah, potentially beyond, because, yes, you've outlined how position. Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Tuitt? Councillor Rodds? Yeah, I mean, only factual questions at this stage. We're obviously going to move on to discussion later. Mr. Newman, so just stick to factual questions. Yeah. No further questions? If you've got a quick factual question, I'm willing to take that. I can't hear you. I think you're on mute.
Yeah, I can reframe it as a question. However, I just merely want to point out that my client would not do anything illegal with 3 men of good character. It's been impressed upon them the consequences of going beyond any appointed hours if they are granted outside of their permissions, planning permission. And also we do have Mr. Healy here, who some of you may remember as in his earlier career in planning, he was the Hackney planning officer and veteran of these hearings.
Thanks very much. That's probably a representation rather than a question, but we've heard what you say. Thank you. I don't think you particularly need to respond to that, David, but you can quickly if you want to.
No, that's fine, Chair. I'll leave it for discussion.
Okay, thanks very much. All right, I think we're now going to move on to the other parties. Thank you very much, everyone, for attending this evening. It's obviously really, really important that people take the opportunity of taking part in these processes. There's obviously quite a number of different people have attended, I mean, I think it's obviously very important that we get the opportunity to hear from everybody who wants to speak. However, what I would say is that I don't think it would greatly assist, I think, the process, and also myself and my colleague, if people keep their remarks as brief as possible and don't repeat what other people have said, because we will take into account every point that people do make. I think it would be most helpful if I ask Councillor Clouvier. No, you don't want to. Is there, I mean, I don't know whether, okay, I think what's probably a more helpful question really is, has there been any discussion among the other parties about whether one person's going to speak for you, or whether you're going to, is going to be the first person to speak? I can see that Louise has got a hand up. That's great. I mean, that's really, really helpful. I think it really help our sort of deliberations and clarity if you can bring most of the points in. Obviously, if other people have got things to add, I will allow them to speak, but it'd be great if you could just summarise the position. I mean, normally, and Ollie as well, I think, Solomon has put his hand up as well. I mean, normally we would allow you around 5 minutes each. I hope that would be enough for you to make your points. And I think Gala wants to speak as well. I mean, if you can make it slightly less than that, and then Councillor Clouvier summing up at the end. Is that what? Okay, so we'll have those 4 people, and then we'll see how we go. So I'll start with Louise, Ollie, Gala, and then Councillor Clouvier.
Okay, great. Thank you. Can you hear me okay, yeah?
I can. Thank you very much.
Okay, so yeah.
There is whisper interference, but we'll have to live with it. So.
So I have spoken to a number of other residents, particularly myself and some others who live very close to the arch, and we've got a list of points here that we've been talking about over the last few days. So I'll just go straight into it. So we think the particular stretch of North Mentmore Terrace, where the premises is located, is occupied by long-term Hackney residents living in family homes at street level. There are currently no arches on this northern stretch of the terrace open in the evenings. It's a very different landscape to that of the southern part of the terrace, where people live in new flats high above the street. There are a couple of small premises on the southern end of the terrace, which open until 10 p.m. on school nights and 11 p.m. on Fridays and Saturdays. The Nest referred to Wheezy as a late night opening arch, but that is a grocery delivery service where they use electric bicycles. So we really don't think it's comparable. It doesn't have customers coming and going all the time. So really, we feel that Nest painted a picture of a street with an existing nighttime economy. However, this is not the case. There is little open after 6 p.m. and nothing in the stretches of the arches where they plan to open. However, we have experienced noise and disruption caused by the sort of one-off events they've had at E5 Bakehouse and Three Sods Brewery, and we know how this impacts on our quiet enjoyment of our homes and our ability to sleep. Nest say they have compromised on opening times. In fact, they have mostly significantly reduced their times in the morning, and it's the evenings we are concerned about. So I do have a copy of the decision of the planning permission granted in October 2018 for restaurant usage, and the conditions specifically stated, the use hereby permitted may be carried out only between 8 a.m. and 2300 hours daily. Reason, to ensure that the use is operated in a satisfactory manner and does not unduly disturb adjoining occupiers or prejudice local amenity generally. So we assume that this would mean that last orders on any night would need to be at 10:30 in order for the premises to be closed at 11. We feel that this, anything else would contravene the Statement of Licensing Policy LP 5.B, that the hours sought do not exceed those authorised by any planning permission. And we don't feel that a second planning permission is appropriate because, you know, we've already gone through this back in 2018, and they've made this decision that nothing should be open beyond 11, and, you know, to go back to that again is really wasting everyone's time. Hackney Council are already aware that the consumption of alcohol around London Fields has become problematic. This licence will do nothing to help that situation. To the contrary, it will act as a precedent to other arches, and the street will become a nighttime destination, which it currently is not. Nest claim they are food-led. However, the menu for the other restaurants offers tasters and small plates, and there's nothing to stop someone just ordering a few of these and large quantities of alcohol. And they plan to have people in there for a long time, so I think they could consume quite a lot of alcohol. Their conditions say that other people will have to order a substantial meal. However, their menu is not necessarily compatible with this policy. Nest claim that they have no complaints from neighbours at their other restaurants. However, I feel that Morning Lane and Wandsworth Bridge Road are very different streets to Mentmore Terrace. Both are busy A roads, very wide, with an existing nighttime economies. No one moving to those streets would expect it to be quiet. We understand that Nest intends to do everything they can to minimise the noise when patrons leave. However, when people are in good spirits and have had a couple of drinks, they will not remember to keep their voices down when they step outside, and they say loud goodbyes to each other and even stand around chatting. The street acoustics cause the sound to echo, and this noise can easily wake sleeping children and adults. Their statement does not say how the customers will be encouraged to use Lamb Lane for taxi services. This seems very hard to implement. The additional information provided is unclear about the use of music. This has been covered, I know, that they're saying about recorded music and background music, but I don't really understand what the difference is because they're saying they're not having recorded, but they are having background, so I'd like clarity on that. If permission is granted, we would want to see opening times not beyond 10 p.m. on school nights and 10:30 on Fridays and Saturdays. We would also want to clarify there'll be no music and ensure that all deliveries and all rubbish disposals take place within 8 a.m. and 8 p.m. only. And that concludes my points.
Thank you very much, Louise. That was very helpful. Can we go on to Ollie Solman now, please? Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for the time to speak. I wanted to draw the committee's attention to the venue itself. 392 to 393 Mentmore Terrace is a large premises. It's over 3,000 square metres. The restaurant that Nest proposes will have a 90-person or cover capacity. This is significantly larger than any other business that operates at this residential end of Mentmore Terrace. And there's no other business that would operate in the evening that is close to that in any other way. The capacity of the restaurant would give Nest the opportunity, should they want to do 2 evening sittings, even though they're not proposing that. But even a fraction of those kind of numbers coming through represents a significant uplift of people on the street late at night, 7 days a week. 6 days now, according to the correction. So this is a complete and fundamental change to the nighttime of the economy of this end of the street, is what we're saying. The proposed entrance and exit to the venue is approximately 14 metres from the front door of our family homes. There's no intervening physical barrier or anything to mitigate the noise of the disturbance that the coming of going of 90 covers 6 days a week is more than likely to cause. Many of our houses we have children, and we're very, very worried about the negative aspects on sleep disturbance. Children go to bed at 8 p.m. or earlier. A lot of people who have to get up for work may go to bed way earlier than the proposed closing times, or most of them. Again, nearly all of the licensed premises along Mentmore Terrace close earlier than what the Nest are proposing, barring the change to Sunday. 3 Sods is closed at 6 p.m. every day. Rosa's Thai is open till 10 p.m. during the week, 11 at the weekends. E5 Bakery is only open to 5 p.m. all the way through the week. Even London Fields Brewery is only open to 11 o'clock on Thursday, which is the same as what Nest are proposing. At all other times, they're closed earlier. So essentially, there's no real business who's asking for the kind of hours that Nest are for the consumption of alcohol, plus a half an hour for patrons to leave, plus after patrons leave, staff will have to leave. So, you know, we're talking about activity on the street, which is going to fundamentally change the nature of the street. Whilst we appreciate Nest's articulation and ethos and proposed practices to reduce any disturbance, and we take their word for it, but we don't actually see any definitive means or power for Nest to control the behaviour or general noise level of their customers leaving late at night. We've heard about Nest's impeccable record in managing this issue in other locations, Morning Lane and Fen in Fulham. Louise touched upon this, but these are not locations which are similar in any way to the north end of Mentmore Terrace. This is a really, really quiet road. There's no traffic at night. It's residential. The residences are very close to any businesses across the road, and Morning Lane and Fulham Palace Road are not like that. Morning Lane and Fulham Palace Road, those two restaurants, as far as we can understand, are much, much smaller than this proposed venue. So we don't see Nest having experience in managing a venue of this size or this number of covers. So, I mean, I don't think that's a proven. As we've said, we think the granting of this licence will initiate significant change in the nighttime environment of the street to the detriment of the quality of life of local residents, including children. We think it will encourage other licensed venues of a similar thing, which will push licensed venues that will push the price up of the leases on all of the arches along the way. And there'll be a fundamental change in the types of businesses that can afford and operate in the arches opposite our homes. So there's slightly more at stake. As we already experience an amount of antisocial behaviour, crime and disorder and public nuisance generated by licensed venues. And indeed, it's an issue for the whole area in and around London Fields, and we don't feel that granting another licence along Mentmore Terrace in any way contributes to a positive management strategy or policy by Hackney. And we would ask that this licence is not granted. We don't believe that Nest have invested significant any money, in fact, in the site so far, so everyone could walk away and we could be allowed to live our lives in peace. However, to emphasise Louise's point, if the licence was to be granted, we would really, at the very least, ask for a 10 p.m. closing time on weekdays and Sundays, and a 10:30 weekend curfew. We feel this would really help support and protect the well-being of local residents and their families. Thank you for your time.
Thanks very much, Ollie. I can see that Troy Healy's got your hand up. We're going to be moving on to a discussion phase after this. I think I would like to hear from all the other parties before we move on to any more questions or discussion. There will be plenty of opportunity for that in the next stage. Thank you. I'm now going to call on Gala Carr.
Hi.
Yeah. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you, Chair. Hi, yes, I'm Gala Pollock. I'm a resident and have lived on Mentmore Terrace for 20 years. I strongly object to this application for numerous reasons, but mostly Ollie has covered very, very succinctly and very well, so I totally support what he said. But really, just for sort of context of us, yes, we've lived here for 20 years. My daughter's bedroom faces Mentmore Terrace. Her window looks directly onto Mentmore Terrace, and, you know, recently she's kept awake by rowdy, drunken, antisocial behaviour, and actually this really does have an impact on people's lives. It has an impact on her mental well-being. It has an impact on her quality of sleep, which has and is affecting her school life. And me as a mother, I'm just speaking to you, you know, I am incredibly concerned about this, and I'm incredibly concerned about the opening hours, the hours of operation. And I really urge the councillors just to refuse this application and to really listen to what the residents' concerns, you know, what we're saying. We have lived here for over 20 years. We're not against daytime activity in any way, but if you grant this application as it stands, you really will be setting a very worrying precedent for the future of Mentmore Terrace, and it will be irrevocably changed forever. And I just feel this will have a big negative impact on all of the residents on the street. So that's really all I want to say.
Thanks very much, Gala. I now move on to Councillor Clevier. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I mean, this would be a fundamental change. I think that's a very important point. You have immediate neighbours in the front and the back. I'm here to also corroborate the fact that this area is problematic, and the fact that there have been many complaints already when premises, when alcohol licensed premises have opened and caused ill effects. A number of them have failed. This is not an area that lends itself to hospitality industry venues. Actually, I think they cause a lot of problems and then they go away because there isn't passing trade, and it's a relatively isolated area, and there's no buzz in the evenings because it's quiet. So it isn't really where you want to go for a night out. So this is why, A, it's not a good idea, and B, why granting this license could institute what the residents are obviously also very concerned about, which is a change, an unwelcome change to the area. I mean, this is reflected in the planning. 11 o'clock being set at the limit is a clear indication of the overall view of how this could be a problem. Just want to say that regarding the withdrawal from LFUG, yeah, that's appreciated, but quite correctly, they would have been here to oppose off sales, and that's been withdrawn because they're talking about the area and particularly the drinking in London Fields. So they would have withdrawn their objections on that basis, and I welcome that. I welcome the changes to the hours, but I support the residents in their suggested compromise of bringing the hours even earlier, given the proximity of families to the restaurant. And I understand that would make it difficult for the premises to be viable. I think we're pushing the viability of the premises as it is. Mr. Newman referred to now having a robust set of conditions, especially for a restaurant. So, I worry about applications where you just pile on conditions in order to get something where it starts to look like a shaky start. I just want to sum up: the licensing policy expects applicants to demonstrate that they have an understanding of the nature of the locality in which the premises are located, and that this has been taken into consideration whilst preparing the operating schedule. Unfortunately, that isn't what happened, and we've been sort of paddling back ever since, and I'm concerned that this is finished up with an unsatisfactory situation, and possibly better just not being here at all. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Councillor Clevier. I mean, it's obviously, I think we've got clearly got a number of points for discussion. I'll start off really, I think, by putting some further questions to the applicants and their representative of some points that I've got noted, which are arising from the other parties. I think firstly, I'd really like you to clarify what your understanding of the planning position is, and also any sort of additional future plans that you have in relation to that. I'd also like some details of the dispersal policy and how you consider that's going to be operating, and particularly bearing in mind the many concerns that have been raised, I think, by the other parties in relation to the impact on the location of there being so many additional people there, and also how that will be managed in a dispersal policy. So I'll ask you to address those two questions first, and then I'm sure we're going to be moving on to further questions and discussion from colleagues. Thank you. Thanks. You're off mute. Thank you.
Councillor, may I start with planning firstly?
Yes,
There's a
thank
lot
you.
of information I'm trying
Yeah.
to absorb here, and of course it is a balance. But if we start with planning, that would be a great place to start, because firstly, listening, many of the comments may be more suited to a planning hearing. I'll bring in Mr. Troy Healy shortly, if I may, but I'll just make these points. In law which overrides policy, it is allowable to apply under either regime first. And it's planning that has more so, stand to be corrected by Emma Pluvier and co, but under the planning regime fits more with the style and what can be applied for, and it's every applicant's right to apply with the presumption that something should be granted. Of course, it's a balance. The clients, as said earlier, are all three men of good character with good history who wouldn't do anything illegal.
I mean,
Sorry.
if it would assist you, I mean, I'm not disputing that you can make this application. I just really wanted, there's some uncertainty really in relation to the planning position. You've heard what Mr. Tuitt and residents said. I just really want you to clarify your factual understanding of it. Thank you.
Yeah, of course. Thank you, Councillor. I mean, no disrespect. I mean, I've pointed out before that your very own planning specialist has made no representation or informative. Perhaps as the resident expert, if you were so minded, perhaps you'd like to ask Mr. Healy to answer that question. Would that be helpful?
Yeah, Mr. Healy, really, if you could just give your understanding of that. Thank you.
Do you have any specific, sorry, you'll have to forgive me, I've lost my voice a little bit, but any specific queries or concerns?
Yeah, I mean, it was just, I mean, my understanding from Mr. Tuitt is that the position in relation to planning that he's been able to trace from Hackney's website is in relation to an application which is not consistent with the current application for the hours. And I understand there's going to be another application submitted. I know that, apologies, I've forgotten which one of the other parties said that they found a
I
copy.
believe
It's Louise.
Louise.
Yeah. Louise, yes. He's found a copy of the actual granting of planning permission, which I understand confirms what Mr. Tuitt said. I just want, but there's also been, I understand there's going to be further application made. Could you just really confirm what that position is? I mean, just briefly, and I don't want to labour this point, as there are a number of other points to go through.
So I've actually requested the copies of the decision myself from planning, but unfortunately, due to the hack that occurred earlier this year, they've got some chaos in relation to being able to find specifics. So it's we do have a copy of it now ourselves, and it's great that Louise has a copy of it as well. It does grant permission for use of the property as a restaurant until 11 o'clock daily. So we would be seeking a planning application to regularise the hours in line with the licence.
If granted, okay, thanks. That's really helpful. And let's. I don't think I've got any further questions on that, unless my colleague has. But I think we'll just move on to dispersal policy.
If I could comment just briefly in relation to this. So I don't know whether you yourself or any of the other councillors are involved with planning yourselves, but something to note is that from September of last year, this actually, along with all restaurants, moved into the E use class, which is a much broader use class than previously in relation to commercial premises. So actually this could be pretty much anything from a creche all the way through to through to a restaurant, and it would still be operating in accordance with the approved hours.
Yeah, I don't think anyone's disputing that either, but thank you. That's really helpful. Okay, so thanks very much. Mr. Newman, if you or your client wants to tell us about dispersal policy addressing the licensing conditions and also the concerns, particularly the concerns raised by the other parties, I'd be very grateful. Thank you. I think you're still on mute. Okay.
Thank you, Madam. I'll do my very best because there's a lot of information from different parties. I'm trying to answer everything at once to save time. Firstly, I did mention the proposed venue is in the old waiting room of London Field Station. Luke here has got the details of the hours that the trains run. However, ideally, what we would like is for patrons to, and what will happen, is for patrons to go to the station. Other than that, there are some people locally, and no doubt, and there are some people that will go to a taxi where Luke has arranged how people would go there. We want, and what we'll have, is that staff will know all the details of local firms. We'll be speaking to drivers and Uber drivers to ensure that there's no honking of horns or slamming of doors. Staff will, where practicable, actively monitor patrons with a view to minimising any noise. There'll be constant team meetings to ensure that there's best practice, and people will be reminded that when they leave the premises, and indeed get to, but especially when they leave, to respect the neighbours. There'll be signs up to respect the neighbours and the area, and it will be very much the case that people won't be allowed to come back if they don't respect the neighbours. Luke can probably go in more if you allow it to their procedures in getting people into cabs.
Thank you. I think it would be very helpful for us to hear from Luke on that point. Yeah, I mean, I think really, and also the sort of broader points really in relation to, the impact of that amount of people coming into this residential street, the concerns in relation to antisocial behaviour as well as dispersal, but I mean, how you're going to be managing these premises and the impact of them throughout the evening if this licence is granted. Thanks very much.
Yeah, so I guess the main difference with this restaurant is it's I guess our control over the whole experience. I mean, our ambition is to be, ideally, well, one of the best restaurants in London at least, but it's very much an experience kind of led thing. So from the very beginning, there'll be no walk-ins. I mean, I think someone mentioned the fact that it's like there's not much walking passing trade or anything like that, but all bookings will be pre-booked online, and so from that point all the way through to when they arrive, it's they don't get a choice in terms of what they're eating unless there's dietary restrictions, but it's all completely controlled. So yeah, they'll have their set arrival time, which they'll have to obviously get, and then the experience of food is controlled, obviously extended. So I know you mentioned that there's a 90 cover capacity, but that won't be the case. I know Ollie mentioned earlier that there is potential to get 2 in, but that is not what we're going to be doing. So our capacity would be 50 on any given evening. So then, and once they've sort of been taken through the experience, so again, the venue would be split up into the dining room where they've eaten and the waiting room, which is where they would come and wait before the meal, but then also, and significantly after the meal, that's where they would wait if they were leaving. So there'd be a designated kind of like staff member to manage that whole experience. They wouldn't be waiting on the street for a taxi. They wouldn't be waiting, on the street until their train. They'd be waiting in the waiting room until that time. And unlike, and I know someone mentioned that, other restaurants, that this isn't similar to that. I mean, the level of sort of control of the experience means that we can do exactly that. We can sort of control the way they enter and the way they leave. So, and that would be literally a physical person saying, if you'd like to get a taxi, it's from this point. If you'd like to leave by train, the train times are, X, Y, and Z. and obviously our operating hours would be, you know, well inside the train timetables. Yeah, I don't know if that's answered your question.
Yeah, I mean, thanks very much. That's very helpful. I'll now invite my colleague, Councillor Odds, to ask some questions. I think I will have some more questions, but Councillor Odds.
Yeah, thanks. First of all, I'd like to make a comment on what Ollie Solomon said during his presentation. He mentioned the financial aspect of the restaurant, and I must tell you that the licensing committee is not by law allowed to take into consideration the financial aspect or the financial viability of a particular application. It's decided purely on licensing grounds, so I'm afraid that is not really relevant. My experience of Mentmore Terrace, I'm afraid, is not relevant because it goes back to the 1960s when I lived on London Fields. Except in the 1970s and 80s when my mechanic was in one of the arches in Mentmore Terrace. But it's changed considerably since those days. As both Louise and, well, everybody said, it's now a heavily residential area on the opposite side and at the back as well. In London Lane, there's a lot of residences there. So I'm wondering, you know, I noticed that you've limited Sunday to 10:30, so to 8:30, which is, you know, progress. Do you Ollie, not Ollie, sorry, gentleman representing Nest, not Mr. Newman, the proprietor. You mentioned that you're closing within the train timetables. Would you know what the sort of the frequency and the last trains are from London Fields, and how many of your clients do you, obviously it would be a guesstimate, would be arriving by train, and how many would be arriving in vehicles?
Yeah, I mean, obviously the proximity is to the station. You know, it's in the same building. It used to be in the station. And also, I mean, this probably has no relevance whatsoever, but the name of the restaurant would be the ticket office. And so the whole experience is around the idea that you would get a ticket to, you know, board your train, as it were. Obviously not gimmicky, but yeah. And so that and it being so close means that it's, you know, and on the booking and the website, which it would only be booking, so everyone would be booking it, and on the confirmation email would be exactly that, there's a link to the London Fields train times, and then yeah, it would be in line with that. I mean, as you said, it would be a guesstimate to know exactly how many people would travel that way, but the fact that it's right next door and the fact that it's all part of the whole story and part of the experience of the restaurant. I'd imagine a significant number. But yeah, and then train times, I've taken from, sorry, I'm just getting it up, from the tfl.gov.uk up-to-date timetable as it is at the moment, is so southbound, I mean, there's different trains at different times, but the last train, let's say midweek,
sorry to interject. Sorry to interrupt. Can I just ask that the other persons please do not put messages in the message box. You have to wait your turn to make any submissions via the chair. We've said at the start of the meeting that we won't allow messages to be put up randomly in the message box. So if you can refrain from doing that, please. Thank you.
So yeah, I mean, I'm sure everyone can, I can sort of forward this link if you'd like, but yeah, the content on tfl.gov.uk has the up-to-date timetables. There's, you know, northbound on Sundays, for instance. The latest one is 23:37 from London Fields. Northbound on Saturdays is 7 minutes past midnight. Then northbound Mondays to Fridays.
Sorry, when you say northbound, is that into London Liverpool Street, or is that out of town?
That is towards Chingfield, Enfield Town and Chestnut.
Out of town.
Out of town. Yeah, latest one being 7 minutes past midnight. And I can go southbound is somewhere. I mean, it's similar times. So 17 on Saturdays at 17 minutes past midnight, southbound back into Liverpool Street. Do you want me to go through the other days?
No. I think we get the idea.
Okay.
Do you have further questions, Councillor Odds, at this stage?
Not at this stage. I think everybody has put their points quite well. As I say, my concerns at this point are well, actually, there is one further question. Sorry, Chair. We've been concentrating on the disruption and the possibility of ASB caused by drunkenness. If you had clients in the restaurant who appeared to be drunk, what would be your actions, your attitude? And do you think it's likely?
So well, the restaurants that we've run, we've never had an issue at all. And I think, you know, I think if anyone came to any of the restaurants, they'd know the experience, like the situation of it. And, you know, there's obviously lots of people who can verify that. Yeah, we haven't had a situation that's arisen. But yeah, in that situation, first thing is no more alcohol. They'd be escorted to well, the waiting room, where they'd then be called a taxi, and be sort of yeah, physically sort of taken off the premises. And we'd log it in our instant sort of log, and they'd, well, I mean, they wouldn't be allowed back to the restaurant, but yeah. And I suppose if it was an escalated situation, it would be yeah, calling the authorities to sort of step in.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I can see that a number of people are indicating. I'm just going to ask a couple more questions, and then I'll allow the people that are indicating from the other parties to come in. Just following on from Councillor Odd's question, I mean, what sort of training do your staff have in relation to sort of door supervision and sort of managing people's behaviour? Are there any people who are sort of qualified in those areas? I think the second question for either you or your representatives, I think that there have been issues raised on the sort of cumulative impact of these premises on the area, and, you know, and in relation to you know, to how this is going to significantly extend the sort of you know, the amount of people and the type of premises that is going to be on that area. I mean, we've had a description of a residential street with very different types of businesses. They're none of which are having sort of reasonably significant amounts of people. I understand it is going to be around 50, and who close a lot earlier. So really, if you could just maybe sort of address both those points, either you or your representative. I'm happy for either of you. I think Mr. Newman wants to come in.
Thank you, Chair. I definitely do, because there are so many questions back and forth that I don't want to lose their impact and respond accordingly. My first response to what you just said is this is not a cumulative impact area or special policy area. They're in the middle of Dalston and the middle of Shoreditch.
I know it's not a special policy area, but the cumulative impact policy applies to everywhere. So LP 13, I think it is. But,
okay. Well,
yeah.
I stand corrected. My understanding in practice, it was mainly for those areas and places adjacent to. Sorry, I'm taking so many
Amanda
questions.
might want to come in and clarify something there.
Yes, I just wanted to say, Mr. Newman, through the chair, is that yes, we accept that it's not in the SPA, but there were issues of negative impact potentially arising, which you've heard this evening from the other residents, and therefore you do need to address that at the impact on the area and how that will be dealt with going forward.
Thank you, and I fully do intend to address that. That's one of the many questions that have come, quite rightly, because we do understand the sensitivities around this. Firstly, just going back to the training, I'm an ex-licensing sergeant, chair of the Licensing Officers Engagement Group, and a consultant, and so on and so forth. Just to expand on Luke's earlier answer to Councillor Odzer about anybody being drunk, which would be a first for them, but there's also the welfare part as well, which I'll be explaining to him. WAVE is a concept that's used by the Metropolitan Police, put out by Ian Graham, the policy lead. In terms of antisocial behaviour and crime and all the rest of it, firstly, I'm advising. Secondly, the police, who are the lead authority for antisocial behaviour and crime, are satisfied. Their concerns are allayed. So they don't believe that there is any likelihood of antisocial behaviour or crime from this premises. This is very much a food-led premises, which is innovative, whereby it's a slow food concept, which is different. I've put the law in my previous representations about how one should look at the police, give consideration to what the police say in terms of evidence, because there is no evidence at this stage to support the notion that this is going to cause loads of antisocial behaviour and what have you. The other point I make, is one resident at least said there's loads of problems for licensed premises. Others said there is none. If we look at other premises, the Three Sods, for example, is clearly, that's a craft brewery, that's a drink-led premises. Plonk has a very different operator to my clients. I'll leave that there. We're somewhat hamstringed by not having, by the council website being hacked, but forgive me, I think it's called the Light Bar in Hemsley Place, just up the road. They've got hours going up to midnight on Friday and Saturday for late night refreshment. The brewery in Warburton Street has much longer hours. In terms of Wheezy, I think that goes into the early hours of the morning, and I believe it was Ollie that said in our meeting that they're not yet operating properly, albeit they are a delivery service. In terms of the history of Nest in the other two locations, yes, they are different, but these are three guys, the applicants, of good character, who, I repeat, have run their premises without any complaints, without any intervention from the authorities. And that should speak for itself. There's loads of supporting evidence from people. And in terms of, just cover everything really, but in terms of not knowing the area and just adding conditions when the application was made, well, I wasn't involved at that stage. However, 2 of these 3 directors and 4 of their staff live in Hackney. One of the directors used to live in Richmond Road, round the corner. They are aware of Hackney and the local area. There's still the presumption in law, correct me if I'm wrong, Amanda, that when an application is made, unless it's in a cumulative impact zone, it should be granted unless it can be shown and demonstrated that there will be these issues that would either reduce hours or cause one to refuse. But I repeat, the police and environmental health and all the other responsible authorities, apart from a comment on planning, don't have any issues. David Tuitt of licensing said earlier they've accepted table meals. Well, we accepted substantial meal, which is a whole different beast. A table meal can be, I don't know, there's a whole problem with that definition, but that can be something very, very simple indeed, whereas a substantial meal is what it says. And here, I think, Luke, it's 9 courses, isn't it? Or something of that nature? Just not.
Yeah, it'll be at least 9, closest to sort of 15. A long journey.
I hesitate before mentioning human rights and other laws that allow one to apply for something. We've covered planning. There was the comment made that there are going to be large quantities of alcohol consumed. The history shows they're responsible operators. What else do we have? Fair point about the number of people, but they manage their people well. Patrons and staff will be trained. Street acoustics. Now, I'm not an expert in noise, so I can't comment on that. However, environmental health and noise are recognised experts in street acoustics, and they don't have any issue. Adding the number of conditions, every single condition, especially since I've been employed, have been carefully considered before agreeing. As stated, the detriment of quality of life, we haven't seen any evidence, and price up of leases and types of business. I'm not sure that's a licensing issue. I really don't know. What else have we got? So I'm just going through rapidly what everybody has put. There is going to be a situation where there's going to be a hotline, so any issue whatsoever, Nest can be contacted and respond. Setting a precedent, I'm not sure that's something that legally applies in this street. I don't know if Amanda could help with that. What else have we got?
Yeah, I mean, thanks very much, Mr. Newman. I think you've probably, certainly covered a great deal of points, and and I think, I think I'm going to be moving towards drawing this discussion to a close shortly, but I'm going to bring in Louise and Councillor Pluvier, and then Councillor Odds, who I think has got a further question. But then we're going to be trying to move this discussion to a close and moving on to closing statements. I think we have covered you will get an opportunity to speak, obviously, for your closing remarks. So I think I'm just going to move on to sorry, very quickly, Andy, if you want to say.
Sorry, Councillor. Would it be helpful if Amanda would either now or later cover some of the points that have been raised? Because there are some quite important points of law here. Yeah,
I think we're clear that what we're looking at is the licensing objectives, but also, obviously, Hackney's council policies. I think my colleague, Councillor Odds, and myself are quite experienced in this role, and I think we're clear that that's what we are addressing. So I don't know whether you've got anything to add to that, Amanda, but I think we're clear about what's relevant to that and what's not relevant. But that's really helpful. Thank you. Okay, so can I just move on to Louise and then Councillor Pluvier? Thank you.
Oh, hi. Yeah, I just wanted to point out that when Luke was talking, when they were talking about people getting the trains, that there isn't actually a door through to the station. People will come out onto the street and then have to go back into the station. So there will be, it wouldn't be sort of like a sort of direct thing to get their train. They will have to go onto the street and then get back in. And also, I really don't think it's relevant the opening times of places on Helmsley Close, which is not on Mentmore Terrace. It's, there's a pub on the park around the corner. That opens late, but in Mentmore Terrace, it's quiet. It's residential. And that's really, I think, another bit for us. That's all.
Thanks very much. Louise, Councillor Plivier.
Thank you, Chair. Just very quickly, I mean, all the points about the environment are for your general information. People do feel under siege in this area and have done for a while, and they have to attend an awful lot of planning and licensing hearings, and they're getting very good at it. But this is just for your general information. This is about the area. The main point here is public nuisance. Public nuisance, can I please stress, in licensing, is not bad behaviour, it's not antisocial behaviour, it's not people peeing, it's not all that stuff, it's not people being disgustingly drunk. I'm assuming that everyone who goes to this restaurant pays for a decent meal and they pay to be happy. And happy people who've had a couple of drinks are happy, and that's good. And you can't dragoon them out with beverages around their mouths to their taxis. So what we have here is residents who live very close to this premises who have told us that they have children sleeping in bedrooms very close to this premises, and that is the core of the group of objections, and that is a thread running through the objections. And they have asked, as a compromise, for 10 o'clock on what they refer to as school nights and 10:30 Friday and Saturday, and that's really the nub of the issue. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Councillor Plivier. Councillor Odds, I think you had a further question.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I was going to ask about, well, first of all, can I say that in your, Mr. Newman, and your people you represent, in your additional material, as far as I'm concerned, a couple of points there, you didn't do yourself any favours, particularly by quoting European Union law. That's totally irrelevant because we're no longer part of the European Union, and the Treaty on the European Union does not apply to the UK. And also, the former editor of Waitrose Food, I suppose it could have been worse. You could have quoted Jay Rayner, but I don't think those points are totally relevant. But what I wanted to ask you was, in terms of this so-called dispersal policy, there's no guarantee that you'd be able to enforce that. But the other point I was going to ask, would you be agreeable to a condition? I note that you've spoken to the residents and had various negotiations with them. Would you be agreeable to a condition of meeting on a regular basis, let's say quarterly, with one of the local councillors or other representatives of the residents in order to resolve any issues there might be? And in that case, would you prefer to set up some sort of formal committee? Or you say you've got a hotline, but is that going to be advertised? How is it going to be advertised? And in my opinion, if you would agree to that, that might allay some of the residents' concerns.
Thank you, Councillor. Firstly, I apologise. European law was left in by an error. I take full responsibility for that. We've currently offered regular meetings. As far as meetings with a councillor or councillors and so forth, I need to ask Luke, my client, either privately or unless he wants to answer right now.
Yeah, I definitely welcome regular meetings. I mean, I'd be the designated premises supervisor, so it'd be my number. But on top of that, formal meetings where we can kind of meet with all the local residents, I think is only going to be beneficial for everyone. I think us being in there, we genuinely do have the concerns of you guys and the residents. I think it's going to help if we can stay there for many years to come and be with our CCTV and actually the nature of the restaurant. If we can be there for the long term and have a good relationship, I think it's only going to be good for that local community. If the license was granted to someone else, or if we couldn't make it work, and a sort of a standard restaurant, as it were, who could get 90 covers in, or who could operate with sort of slightly more of a standard way that might generate, that might jeopardize those licensing objectives. I think that'll be. I think meeting regularly would be good, basically. So yes, I would welcome that.
Thanks very much. I think I'm now, unless anyone very quickly wants to say something else, I'm going to move on to closing statements. Gala, I think you said something, Amanda and Councillor Pluvio, but and Mr. Newman, but really please be very quick. Thank you.
So mine just is very quick, just Luke saying that, everyone's going to take the train. I mean, again, I don't think we can obviously have any foresight on that. There are going to be 50 taxi Ubers coming onto our street. Again, I'm not satisfied in any way that they have thought about the impact. Andy Newman talks about that. He hasn't thought about the impact on the residents in any way. I'm not satisfied with the disbursement order at all. So I really urge you to look at this and refuse this application on those grounds. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Gala. I haven't quite, I thought you were going to make a question. I haven't really moved on to final statements yet because I have to go in order, but thank you. No problem. Councillor Pluvio? I think you're on mute.
Sorry, apologies. The point raised, the hours requested as a compromise by the residents hasn't been checked with the applicant. So they tend, thanks.
Yeah. Yes. Thank you. That's really helpful. Mr. Newman, if you can, yes, obviously that's absolutely right that the residents have suggested shorter hours. I don't know what your client's response is to that, so that we can consider it.
Yeah, thank you. My hand was raised on that point.
Brilliant.
And I'd like to refute something as well. Firstly, I'd like just clarity on what those residents that are so minded are offering in terms of hours. Is that for licensed activity? Is that for closing up time? I just want some clarity so I can speak with my client on that. And secondly, while I'm on air, I refute that I haven't thought about the residents.
Thanks. Thanks very much. My understanding was that it was, I think, 10 p.m. on school nights. So I think that's because obviously it's not going to be open on Monday. So that's Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. And my understanding was that was 10 p.m. following, including dispersal, but I may have misunderstood that. It may be, I think Louise is, you can obviously, and then it was 10:30 on Fridays and Saturdays. I think, sorry, the 10 p.m. includes Sundays, obviously Sundays, missing out Mondays, Tuesday, Wednesday.
Well, Sunday's already beginning agreed at 8:30.
Yeah. 8:30, obviously, Thank you. And that's including dispersal, I think, was what the suggestion was from my note, but people can correct me if I've got that wrong. So I don't know whether you want to take instructions on that.
Yeah, I do. I'd just like to check in with how many that's unanimous for those hours, and I'd like to speak with my client, if I may. I wonder if we could have a 5-minute break so I can do so. Would that be acceptable?
Yes, that's fine. I don't know. Could we just have some advice about how that would operate with the recording?
I think.
I think Mario would just you can say that there'll be an adjournment for 5 minutes, and then he will continue, and so it will, everyone will go on non-visual for 5 minutes, and Mr. Newman will be able to leave to communicate with his client.
Okay, so we're going to adjourn the hearing for 5 minutes, and we'll come back at well, 8:30. We'll round it up to 6 minutes. Thank you. Okay, Mr. Newman, can we have a, are you able to report back on the outcome of your discussions?
Yes, I am, Chair. However, Luke only has authority for a certain amount of decision making for something that drastic to the business model that they have, and he's going to have to seriously consider. He wanted to do it. They want to do everything the right way, but between the three of them, they'll have to be discussing being unlicensed and operating under Bring Your Own. We're mindful that planning goes up to 11 o'clock. What he is authorised to offer this evening is for the Friday and Saturday for the licensable activity to be reduced to 2,300. And the only other thing we can do is offer 20 minutes to close the premises. Is that acceptable, Luke? Did I get that right? Other than that, he'd have to phone the other two directors to get authority for such a huge decision for the company.
Okay, I mean, thanks very much. I mean, there are other possibilities. I mean, like we can. I mean, I think we do have a couple of other questions as well. Really, I think. Yeah, I mean, thanks very much. That sounds like it's as far as you can go within this particular hearing. I mean, unless you're requesting an adjournment, which would also be something we could consider. But I think we do have a couple of other questions first. And I think, firstly, I mean, obviously, there have been, questions about the. I mean, we've been down this road a little bit before, but questions about the general sort of impact of these premises in terms of public nuisance, the noise. I mean, we've heard from several of the residents really in relation to what's going to be happening with their sleeping children who are adjacent to these premises. I mean, it's certainly. I mean, you've obviously given us some quite detailed information about how you're going to be running it. But I mean, there are going to be. I don't think anyone's pretending there aren't going to be people coming and going on the street. I mean, that sort of nuisance, in terms of the licensing objectives. And also, I think the other point really is in terms of changing the character of the street and being, and I think your client touched on this, and one of the things he said in relation to, indicated that he was aware that this license could transfer to another operator who may have a different operating model, which will obviously be a completely different situation for the residents on the street. So, this is going to be really changing the character of the street, and we just really want your sort of further response on that.
Yeah, in terms of changing the character of the street, I'm sorry, I'm somewhat stymied because that's normally more planning in my experience rather than licensing. In terms of other operators coming in, the conditions are so robust, and I do say for a restaurant because they're possibly akin to a nightclub, but we don't want to say anything that's not true. These are responsible, reliable, proven operators. I can't stress it enough. And in terms of public nuisance, there is a test as to what constitutes a public nuisance that you should be respectfully mindful of. Clearly, people will be, we've been quite open and honest with what's happening and what we're doing, and the point that people have to come out of the train station, out of the restaurant to go in the train station is quite right. But you can only do what you can do. I think we've already heard that there are, whilst not in Mentmore Terrace, you've got pubs and what have you in the local vicinity, and people come out of those and walk along. I don't know what we can say about the nature of the street. I mean, Hackney granted a license to Wheezy, albeit off sales with, I'm told they're silent mopeds, but they're not really operating properly yet, according to Ollie. But nevertheless, they've got till the early hours, and it just, I don't know. It just seems responsible operators, proven track record, no concerns from the police or environmental health, and so on.
Thanks very much. I mean, obviously, when people leave your restaurant, they are absolutely free to go and, increase the amounts of people in local pubs, and there'll be nothing you can do about that. So, I mean, I think, look, I think we really, if you're not applying for an adjournment, which is certainly something I consider, I think we probably need to move on to closing statements. Ollie, I'll give you an opportunity then. So.
Thanks, Chair. No, I was just to
I was going to give you yeah. So is it a question? If it is,
it's a question just to correct. Wheezy is an app-based delivery shopping app. No customers go there, leave, or come out. So their closing time, whatever that may be, is totally irrelevant to this conversation. You order on your phone. A man on a bike picks up your groceries and brings it to your house, wherever that may be. It's completely irrelevant to what we're talking about, just to be clear.
Thank you. Councillor Odds?
Yeah, thanks. Given that Mr. Newman has offered on behalf of his client slightly reduced hours, which I'll summarise as Sundays 12 to 8:30 and Tuesday to Saturday 12 to 2300, all with 20-minute closing up times. Could the other parties please address that issue in their closing statements and say whether or not they would be willing to accept that, whether that would satisfy their concerns? And can I ask Mr. Newman whether he considers that people coming out of the restaurant and walking along the street would cause noise in excess of the trains going through London Field Station? And the third point is, when I spoke before about quarterly meetings with residents or their representative, that you were quite willing to accept that. What have you done in the lead up to actually negotiate to address the residents' concerns? How have you actually engaged with them?
Yeah, Mr. Newman, if you can very briefly answer those points, and I think it would be actually helpful if you can move on to your closing statement as part of the same submission. Thank you. You're on mute. You're still on mute.
Thank you, Chair. Before I do so, Luke, you need to consider an adjournment whilst I answer these questions. Right, Councillor, in what we've done beforehand is we've offered 3 dates for residents and anybody to meet with us to discuss further. In terms of whether there be more noise from patrons than trains, trains are noisy. I can't really answer that other than to say, of course, when people walk, they do chat. I do believe that, given the history, I don't anticipate great problems emanating from this venue. It's how a venue is run that dictates how people behave. And then lastly, the client says he's more than welcome to meet councillors. I think they were all your questions.
Margaret, you're on mute.
Thanks, Councillor Oz. If you're going to apply for an adjournment, you need to do it now. I'm then going to move on to closing statements. We're not going to have any further questions. If you want to make a point, you can make it in your closing statements. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Luke, would you rather adjourn so you can speak to the other directors? I think it may be an idea. It's a matter for you.
Yeah, I guess so. Is that I'm not fully aware of the full implications of it. Is it just I can talk to them and what we readdress this at another date, or?
Yes, I mean we adjourn this evening's hearing without making a decision, and so you can talk to your fellow directors and amend your application if that's what you decide to do. So,
I mean, I think it probably makes sense to do that, being such a big sort of part of the business. Yeah, I guess that's a good shout. Yeah.
Okay.
That would be my advice.
Yeah, Councillor Odds, would you be happy to grant an adjournment in the circumstances?
Yeah, 100%. But I would ask that before, if we grant an adjournment, before we do, the other parties do say what their attitude is to the current hours offered and how much reduction they would want on those, if anything at all.
Yeah, if the licence is granted, yeah. Louise, I don't know whether you're in a position to speak for the other parties.
I can speak for myself, and I think that Ollie and Gala should also be allowed to say their final words. So, in terms of my response to the
sorry, Louise, we're just just looking to your response in relation to the amended hours, because it looks like this hearing may well be adjourned. So I just want your response to that particular point. And then I'm afraid, if we've got the adjournment application, the closing statements and everything else will have appropriately been a different time. I know it's Cathy, but I hope you can hear me.
So we won't be making closing statements. I just have to respond to the hours. Is that what you're saying?
Hours, please. Yes.
Okay. So my response to the hours is that they are still outside of what I would like to see. They're still with an additional 20 minutes drinking up time. They'll still take us beyond what's been agreed in planning, and way beyond what's already been agreed. Which other operators on that street adhere to. So I wouldn't really think it's okay.
Okay, Gala, thank you.
Yes, just to follow up on the hours, I totally echo Louise's point. For me, I would like them, obviously I would like it to be a daytime only establishment, but if not, latest, including drinking up hours, 10 p.m, 8:30 Sunday.
Thank you. Ollie, quickly. Thank you.
Hi, yeah, just quickly, one thing to clarify, noise of trains is something that your body adjusts to within a 2-week period. So it's not actually an issue for disturbing residents, because your body tunes it out and you sleep through the change. Whereas irregular noise, like talking and that sort of stuff, is a different matter. In terms of the hours, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, I was a little bit unclear. I think what was offered in terms of the compromise was just reducing the weekend hours, Friday and Saturday, by half an hour. Is that correct?
Yes, that's my understanding, yeah.
Okay, so that...
20
10 minutes in the closing time.
Yeah,
right,
yeah.
okay, thank you, Councillor. I just think that doesn't really cover any of our concerns during school nights or weeknights, which is a considerable concern for us and our families. That's how I'd answer that.
Okay. Thanks very much. That's really helpful. Suba, I think we're now going to consider the application for adjournment. I think maybe briefly, if I ask Mr. Tuitt to, if he's got any comments on that. The hours?
No additional comments on those hours. It's just, I think the situation with the planning is still the same. So
yeah. Sorry, Suba.
Sorry, Chad. It's just I want to let you know, because of the current situation with the volume of the applications, if it gets adjourned, the application will be listed for hearing in the month of August.
So, I think it would be obviously helpful if it was before Councillor Odds and myself. I think that would save an enormous amount of time. So, if that's
plus another.
Yeah. Another, yes, obviously that.
Right.
We're sitting in. I think we're sitting in August. What date is it? I think it's.
Give me 1 minute.
Yeah. We do have an August date. It's when is it there?
Yeah.
It's the 24th of August.
Yes. Yeah, I can do that. Yeah.
Thank you, Chair.
Okay. Okay. I think our decision is that we're, in light of the application, we're happy to grant the application to adjourn this hearing to be obviously come before us again on the 24th of August if you're pursuing it, or an amended version of it. Okay. I don't think we've got any other business unless there's Mr. Stewart.
No, nothing from me, Chair.
Yeah.
Chair, you can clarify that all parties will be notified so that they can attend on the next occasion as well.
Yeah, thanks, Amanda. You know what Amanda said. So you'll all be notified so you can attend on the next occasion as well. Okay. Thanks everyone for your time.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, councillors.
Yeah. Thank you. Cheers.
Thank you,
Bye.
Chair.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you.
Thanks.